Hello, my name is Keith Rucker, and today I'm out at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture, and we're working on yet another step in restoring the J.A. Vance Planer Matcher that I've been working on for quite a while. This has turned into quite the restoration project. This machine was in pretty rough shape. We decided to bring her back to life, but it seems like every part that we take apart and try to put back on has got something fairly major that has to be redone to it. What I've got right here are some of the feed rollers. The feed rollers actually will grip the board and pull it in. So they are driven, they'll squeeze the board in between them and actually pull them through the planer matcher. There's two sets of feed rollers on this, an inboard side on the outboard side of the top planer head. And this is the bottom roller right here. When we took this machine apart, we had these bearing blocks here that went up on the shaft, and originally these rollers were very slow turning, so it just basically ran steel on cast iron, which is actually a pretty good bearing surface, particularly for slow moving stuff. The problem was that this machine had been used for so many years and was in such bad shape and sat in the weather for so long that when we pressed these bearings off, yes, we had to press them off because they were literally rusted in place. The shaft was pretty pitted, scarred up, and just from years of use too, there was a good bit of play between the two that was just filled up with rust when we pulled it apart. So what we have done we've turned these journals down, the actual bearing journal down, to 1.5 inches, which was just a little bit undersized from the original. And the bearing blocks we actually bored out on the lathe using the 4-jaw chuck to just a little bit oversized. And basically I left about 1/8 of an inch of a gap between the two. And instead of having cast iron on steel like it was originally, we're going to actually put bronze bushings in there. So I've got a piece of bronze stock here. It's actually tubing. The inside is about 1 7/16 inches in diameter, so it's a little bit undersized. The outside is a little bit oversized. So we're going to have to basically cut off this bronze tubing, bore the inside out to the correct diameter, and then turn the outside out so that it'll press fit into the journal here, or into the bearing block. So that's basically the job for the day, is we're going to get these in here. So when we turn these, I will bore. Actually, when I turn these journals, I actually turn them all about 2/1000ths under 1.5 inches. And on the actual bearing, I'm going to use a reamer. I'll bore it out, and I use a reamer to get it exactly 1.5 inches, and that will give me about 1/1000th to 2/1000ths of an inch. Most of the time I try to shoot for about 1.5 thousandths clearance, undersizing the shaft so that we have a good bearing surface. And then on the outside diameter, we're going to turn that. We'll just measure each one of the bearing blocks. I tried to bore all these. I can't remember what I took them to. I tried to bore them all pretty accurately, but I'll measure each one, and we'll turn this bearing so that it's about 1/1000th to 2/1000ths larger, and we'll press those in to the bearings, and then hopefully we'll have a good bearing surface when we put all this back together. Okay, first step here is we're going to cut the bronze to length. So I've just measured this particular bearing block here, and it's about 4 3/4 inches long. We've measured this. We've got the saw set up for 4 3/4 inches, so we'll just saw this off. We've got the piece of bronze mounted in the lathe now. I've got it set up with a boring bar And we're just going to push this through a couple of times. Only got about 60 thousandths of material to cut out of there, so we'll get it just probably 10 or 15 thousandths undersized, and then we'll run the reamer through and clean it up. So you saw the operations in there. What we did, we basically just bored this out, got it a little bit undersized, and then I ran that 1.5-inch reamer through it, which gives a really nice finish on the inside of this bearing, as well as gets it to the proper size. Like I said earlier, we turned all these down about between 1 and 2 thousandths undersized. So now for the moment of truth. Oh yeah, that just, I mean, that's really nice. I can't feel any lateral movement in there, but yet it rotates very nicely. So now I've got a total of 4 of these bearings to do to get one side done for 2 on each of 2 rollers. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the other pieces, and we'll get them all reamed out to the inside while I got the machine set up to do that before we start turning the outside diameters. We're just about ready to start turning these bronze bushings to their outside diameter, and to do that I'm going to turn them between centers on a mandrel, and to do that I need basically a drive center on the drive side or the chuck side of the lathe, and then I'll use a live center on the other side. Now I could use just a regular center that goes up in the spindle, but then I have to take the chuck off. That's a little bit of work. So my little shortcut around this is I basically just got a piece of steel that I put into the 3-jaw chuck, and each time I get ready to use it for turning between centers, I'll just turn a nice 60-degree angle on there, which is what I need to fit into my center. So I got my compound set to 60 degrees, and we're going to turn this on, and again, because it's in a 3-jaw chuck, it's never going to chuck up perfectly right, but I'm just going to take a skim cut off of that, clean that up, and then I'll have a perfectly true center on the drive side, and I don't have to take my chuck off. So we'll get going with that. I have on the lathe right now a turning mandrel. A turning mandrel is made for turning something where you have an inside diameter already cut to finish, and you want to then turn the outside diameter where it will be exactly on center with the inside diameter. As we've already bored out and actually reamed our bushings, bronze bushings to exactly 1.5 inch, and I've checked those with the micrometer, and they are exactly 1.500 inches, so within, you know, right on the money. I purchased this turning mandrel with the idea of using it for this job, and I purchased a 1.5 inch mandrel. However, when I started playing with this, I realized I had a slight problem. Again, the holes in my that I reamed out are exactly 1.5 inches, and the way this is this is actually turned at a very slight taper, so that one end is just slightly smaller than the other end. This is a 1.5 inch. So this is a small end, this is the large end. It's actually marked up here, it says this is the plus side. And when I measure this with the micrometer, this is the small end. It's exactly 1.5 inches on this side, and on this side I am 3 thousandths over. Okay, but because my bores are exactly 1.5 inches, they won't even get started on this mandrel, because this needs to be a little bit less than 1.5 inches on this side, and probably just maybe 1,000th over on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this mandrel where it'll work. Okay, I'm going to set this up with my dial indicator. The lathe should be exactly parallel here. I've checked it before, but I'm going to check it again. But of course, here when I put the indicator on, it should be 3 thousandths smaller on this side than this side. We're going to check that out. And then what I'm going to do is, once I make sure that's right, is I am going to put a taper in here by adjusting the tailstock on the lathe, so that it will be running at a very slight angle. I could use the taper attachment on this lathe, but because it is such a slight taper, I think I'm just going to take this the tailstock out just a little bit. I'll have to put it back in before we go to using it again, but again, I don't think that's going to be a big deal on this, because we only want to be a couple of thousandths taper across that. And because this is hardened, I'm going to have to grind it using my tool post grinder, which I really don't like using on the lathe because you get grinding dust everywhere. So I'm going to lay some towels and rags around to help protect my ways while I'm doing that. But there's really not a better way to do what we need to do here, which is grind this out. So we're going to go get the indicator, put that on here, get everything checked out, get the tailstock set, and then I'll put the tool post grinder on here, and hopefully we'll get this this mandrel set so that it will actually work for what we're going to use it for. I've got the dial indicator set up on here now, and I've checked this out, and again, I know from measuring the mandrel, the large end is 3 thousandths of an inch larger than the small end. Okay, so when I put this on here, as I go down, I should lose 3 thousandths of an inch. So I've got the indicator set on 0. I crank this down. You can see it going down. I get to the other side, and I'm only about 1.5 thousandths of an inch. So my tailstock is already out just a little bit, which is actually probably okay in this situation, because again, we had 3 thousandths of an inch to start with. Sitting here and thinking about it, because I've got such a long bearing, I really don't want 3 thousandths of an inch of taper. I really only want about 1 to 2 inches, or 2 thousandths of an inch. So as it sits right now, this should actually turn out to come out to 1.5 thousandths taper rather than 3 thousandths, but just half of what I'm showing here. So what I'm going to do now is set the tool post grinder up. We'll start grinding this out and measure it along the way and stop when we get just where this end, the large end, is maybe a 1/2 thousandth larger, over 1.5, and then this end down here should be about 1,000th smaller than 1.5 inches. So we'll check that out, and if we have to make an adjustment along the way, we'll do so. But I think we're going to be good to go right here. And then after I do that, I'll have to redo my my tailstock here. I have my tool post grinder set up here on the lathe now. Let me zoom out just a little bit, maybe you can see this, but it's basically just a motor that drives the grinder. It mounts on the tool post, hence the name tool post grinder. This particular tool post grinder that I'm using here actually has a South Bend label on it, so it was made probably for a South Bend lathe, I'm sure. I picked this up at a tool sale someplace. I was actually at an antique hand tool tool meet, and this was sitting on one of the tables, and I was able to get it for a pretty good price. It wasn't a super cheap bargain, but it was a pretty good price. I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was a good deal. I had to do some slight modifications to make it fit on this lathe. Of course, it's made to fit on a smaller lathe than what's here. I basically had to mount it on a piece of 1-inch thick steel here that raised it up just a little bit, and also allowed it to kind of be a little bit more forward to fit on this tool post. But with some slight modifications, it should work fine, or it has been working fine for me. So I'm going to turn this on now. Basically, the grinder will be grinding, the lathe will be turning, and we'll put it on a slow feed and just take a little bit of the time off until we get it down to the dimensions that we want. So here we go. Okay, we made our first pass, and I made my measurements, and we took about a 0.5 off that pass, which is good. And my taper, made a slight adjustment in the tailstock, only about 1/1000th of an inch, to try to get my taper where I want, and we'll double check it again on this one. I also remembered about halfway through this first pass that when you're grinding, you should run the headstock in reverse. You can do it the other way, but basically this grinding wheel is turning in this direction, and if the spindle's turning in that direction, it's like two wheels rubbing against each other. So you actually want to rub this in reverse, and that will basically increase your grinding that you're going to do there. So on this pass, we will run it in reverse the way we're supposed to. I'm going to give this a try now. I'm measuring this, and I'm about 1/1000th and a half smaller on this end. This end is just about 1/2,000th over 1.5. So theoretically, my bushing should fit on this now. We're going to take it off and give it a try. Well, we had to make a few modifications to our mandrel to get it to work, but the good news is after a little bit of grinding, this mandrel is just really almost perfect for these bearings. So basically, again, you know, on this end of the mandrel, I am about a half a thousandth, or excuse me, about a thousandth of an inch under the diameter of the inside diameter of the bronze bushing. On this end, I'm about a thousandth over. I've got about 2 thousandths, really about a thousandth and a half difference across this. So basically, all I did over here was just take this and I pressed the mandrel onto the mandrel onto the bushing, the bronze bushing. And it didn't really, I say press, I used the press just to kind of help get it down in there tight, but it slid down in there, got started on its own, and then I just tightened it up in the press and got it on there. So now this is turning, and because it's turning between centers, again, it's turning in perfect axis to the inside diameter, which will be the bearing surface. So now with this on here, and it's more or less, again, it's like a press fit, I should have enough friction in this mandrel, between the mandrel and the bushing, to be able to turn this to the outside diameter. So we're set up to go now. I am going to make a couple of light passes to start with, because I had to tram my tailstock out a little bit. I'm going to see how much I need to move it back to get it to where it's turning a perfectly true cylinder. So you'll see me as I get started here, actually making some measurements with the micrometer and probably getting the indicator out and making some adjustments back here. Because as it is right now, because of we adjusted it out to grind the taper on there, it should be, the tailstock should be about a 1.5 thousandths out. So we'll make an adjustment for that here after I make a test cut, just kind of see where we're at. So let's get started. we're within about 6/1000ths of the final dimension, and this piece has gotten kind of warm during turning, so I'm actually just going to let it sit here and cool down for a few minutes, because just the heat in that can make a 1/1000th of an inch difference just from expansion from being hot. And because I am going for a press fit here with only about 1,000 inches of clearance, I want to make sure I'm getting a real good measurement when the part is cool rather than when it's hot. So we're just going to let this sit for a few minutes and cool down. And we've let this cool down quite a bit, and rechecked it with the micrometer just now, and it actually was about a 1/2,000th difference. So I'm glad I did that. So right now I've got about 5/1000ths to go, and we're just going to, on this pass, I'm just going to make a spring cut since we did let it cool, figure out exactly where I'm at now that the machine is cooled down, and then we'll make our final cut from there. That bearing should be just right. We'll go press it on. We're ready to press fit the bearing, the bronze bushing, into the bearing block now. And I've got it set up over here on the press, and my measurements are telling me that I'm about 1.5 to 2/1000ths bigger diameter here than here. And I could just press this in, but I'm actually going to try a little trick here that I've used on many occasions to make this job a little easier. And I'm going to take the torch and I'm just going to heat this up. Not red hot, but just heat it up a little bit. And by heating it up, it will actually expand the size of this board just slightly. And with any luck, I can come over here and I'll be able to just drop this down in there. And as you can see, it's not going to go down in there as it is. But when I come over here, I should be able to heat that up. This will drop right down in there, and then when it cools down, it'll shrink back down around it, and this will be shrinked in there and be basically the same thing as press fit. However, I do have it set up on the press. If I heat it up and it doesn't drop down, I can quickly come over here and hopefully press it on in the rest of the way before it heats the bearing up itself. So we're going to heat this up with a torch and hope we get lucky. All right, we'll just let it cool down. All right, there it is, all pressed in. It is, I did try it on the shaft, and it is just a little bit tight. So I think what I'm going to do, I think from just shrinking that on there, it caused the inside diameter to also shrink just a tiny little bit. It will really go on there, but it's just a little tighter than I like. So I'm going to set up the milling machine probably after we get all these pressed on, and we'll just run that reamer back through it one more time just to clean up any slight shrinkage that may have taken place when we press these on there. But this bearing is pretty much ready to go. Got 3 more to go. Out of time today. Had a few little snags. had to rework my mandrel and a couple of little things that popped up during the day that really aren't on video that distracted me to keep me from getting work done. But we got this one ready, and it should be fairly easy now to put the rest of these bearings on the mandrel and turn them down, and we should have all these bearings ready to go in short order. So that's all for today. Thanks.